Offer unto God thanksgiving, and pay thy vows unto the Most High. So, in my thoughts on thanks, and the direction that I was going when I started this study is thanksgiving. Or, before we say grace in a meal, we say give thanks. And I was thinking to myself, is that just a feeling? Or is there a verb component? Because to me it sounds like there's a verb there, give thanks. Does that just mean a hurried prayer before my meal? Because I've said grace before I eat 100,000 times, and I wonder to myself, how thankful am I really? Am I really? So I was looking for a little depth here, and I quizzed my family. I was looking, grasping for straws, and I said, is there a difference between thanks and gratitude? As I dug a little deeper into the word, I started to find that David was actually talking about the first Thanksgiving. And the first Thanksgiving is given to us, if you want to read along with me, the first Thanksgiving is given to us in Leviticus 7. Now, this was originally going to be my scripture, but I figured if the congregation saw that my text was Leviticus, no one would come, because we don't pay much attention to Leviticus. It's all those old stodgy feasts and sacrifices. But if you turn in your Bibles to Leviticus 7, we'll start at verse 11. And this is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which he shall offer unto the Lord. If he offer it for a thanksgiving, then he shall offer with the sacrifice of thanksgiving. I thought that's an interesting word, the sacrifice of thanksgiving. There's something required of me. Unleavened cakes mingled with oil, unleavened wafers anointed with oil, cakes mingled with oil of fine flour fried. Besides the cakes, he shall offer for his offering leavened bread, with the sacrifice of thanksgiving of his peace offering. And if he shall offer it out of the whole oblation for a heave offering unto the Lord, and it shall be the priest that sprinkleth the blood of the peace offerings. And the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day it is offered. He shall not leave any of it until the morning. Now, it goes on to say that whatever was left had to be burned. Bad news, folks. If you follow a Hebrew Thanksgiving, there are no leftovers. But what's interesting about that, and I found this all through the Bible once I started to look, was this concept that was called sacrifice of thanksgiving. It sounds a lot different than the way we use thanks, because I think we use thanks a lot like we use the word love. Are you with me? It's overused, tired. It can be even used sarcastically. Somebody does a joke against you, you're like, gee, thanks. So it's made me wonder, okay, thanksgiving. Every way you break the word down, it says there's something there for me. I'm going to get rid of mics here. There we go. What do you say to the man who saved your life? This is California Highway Patrolman Officer Kevin Briggs, and he's standing with a man named Kevin Berthier. And the reason they're standing in front of the Golden Gate Bridge is, you may not realize this, but the Golden Gate Bridge is one of the world's greatest hot spots for taking your life. People like to commit suicide there. Since the Golden Gate Bridge is opened, 1,600 people have jumped to their death from the Golden Gate Bridge. Ironically, a few have actually survived. And they said the moment they left the surface of that bridge, they knew it was the worst idea they ever had. Officer Kevin Briggs, who's now nicknamed the Guardian of the Gate, it's the name of his book, has actually saved over 200 lives. His 19-year beat with the CHP, he covered the South Marin beat, and it covered that half of the Golden Gate Bridge. 746 feet high with a fall time of about 4.5 seconds. In the time that he was on duty, he only lost 2 lives, and they haunt him terribly. He said they got the gentleman to put on a jacket, to put on their parka, and they talked to him for 3 hours. 3 hours. And at the end, he started to take his jacket off. Kevin Briggs, he said, I didn't know what to do. He's like, no, put it back on, put it back on. And he said, I have to go. And he turned and stepped off the bridge. Horrible. When Kevin Briggs called the family to give them the news, he was so distraught, so horrified, that the next day the family had their rabbi call Kevin to give him comfort. Suicide is terrible. It affects so many lives outside of the one who commits that act. I think the common theme is the person has lost hope, and they just want their pain to end. What many people don't know is that these men never talked about that day. This is the cover of People magazine. They've had their pictures taken together. They've even spoken at the same seminars. But they've never spoken about that day. That was a 90-minute conversation. And 15 minutes of the conversation was Kevin Berthier saying, stay back, get away from me, because he was afraid the officer was going to try and grab him. He just talked to him for 90 minutes. And this picture is in 2005. They stand together. But I thought that over and over, these men never talked about that day. Kevin Berthier's mama, who adopted him when he was 6 months old, had no idea that he had a mental illness. Now, Kevin Berthier didn't talk to Officer Briggs. Don't know about what's happened between them, but Kevin Berthier's mama wrote Officer Briggs a letter. And in that letter, one of her excerpts was, I thank God that God put you in my son's life those 90 minutes. Now, some interesting side facts that I found out about my hero, Officer Briggs, was that Officer Briggs is a 30-plus year sufferer of depression. Isn't that something? His own son became a cutter, was depressed, and was thinking about suicide, and he knew nothing. He found out and was able to intervene. Officer Briggs had no training to do this job, to save 200-plus people. I guess the CHP does training now, probably largely based on his work. But he said that what he would do is he would interview people that he talked off the bridge. And when they had come over, he said he would congratulate them on their decision. And then he said, I'd ask him, what did I say right? What did I say that was good? And he would also ask him, what did I say that was bad? Interesting, do you know what the number one bad thing was that people couldn't stand hearing? I understand. I thought that was something. He retired from the CHP in 2013 to champion suicide and mental health. Ironically, Kevin Berthier also is now a champion for mental health. If any of you like TED Lectures, Kevin Briggs's TED Lecture has over 30 million views. It's really good. I thought this was kind of interesting. Kevin Berthier is not a Christian. Isn't that something? You see, he grew up in a Protestant Catholic household. Dad was Catholic, mom was Protestant. And when mom died, they wouldn't have a service for mom. So in his 20s, he just had no use for church. Let's think about that, though. Would we say he's a Christian? He sure is acting like one. That's man saving man. But what do you say or do for the God who saved yours? The first story that I'm going to get into today is about the Magdalene. Mary earned that nickname, and it was very likely an insult. Why would Magdalene be an insult? Because Magdala was on the Sea of Galilee, and it was a Roman point of commerce. It's actually where the Romans captured the majority of their tax base for this region. So Mary had customers. We know what Mary did for an occupation. So her customers were probably Roman soldiers. So when she first meets Jesus, there's some hatred involved there. They want to trap Jesus. And it would be great if he said that she was worthy of death, because she's the most despised. She's a fallen Jewess. She's a whore, a prostitute, and she's a collaborator with their enemy. So she's the low of the low. We know that Jesus saved her at least 8 times. Once physically from being stoned. 7 times, it just says that he cast out demons. And I'm led to believe that those demons were forgiving her for the prostitution, maybe not actual exorcism, but we don't know. It just says that they had this transaction 7 times. Now, Mary, at her ultimate point in Thanksgiving, is at a feast with Simon. We also know Simon wasn't a very good guy to Mary. He probably had something to do with her fall. Okay? And this is the point where Mary helps Jesus earn the reputation, this man associates with sinners. She was a great sinner. So at this point, there's several things going on here. This is the first foot washing that we have in the Bible. Not with water or soap, but with an alabaster bottle full of perfume. Now we know from Judas how much the bottle costs, don't we? 300 denarii. That's to say that bottle cost what the average man made one day for an entire year. So this is a year's worth of income. Looking at other Bible scholars, this alabaster bottle was maybe much more. Doug Batchelor puts it forward that her tears on Jesus' feet and this bottle of perfume was like her final surrender, her final, maybe a sin offering combined with an offering, a sacrifice of thanksgiving. And you think, perhaps, this is every dollar that she earned that was ill-gotten from a career of prostitution goes into this bottle of perfume and poured out on Jesus' feet. We know from study in the spirit of prophecy that Mary, the Magdalene, is the only one out of all of Jesus' followers that knew he was going to die. She knew his plan. She knew his plan. This relationship is so special. We don't see Mary offering this Levitical offering, but we see her giving everything. And at Judas's criticism, Jesus rises to her defense. He approved. He approved of her great act of thanks. You know, a fun sidebar on Mary. You can tell I'm a big Mary fan. I wanted to dress up like her, but that would have been weird. So you get another character from my story instead. Mary was the first to also see Jesus alive. And she goes up to that gravesite, that tomb. What was she expecting to find? Romans, guards. She goes anyway with boldness. And she sees the gardener. She's like, what have you done with him? I will take him. I love that fierce loyalty. She's not afraid of anybody. She wants the body. And of course, we know the gardener is actually Jesus. And he says her name, Mary, Rabboni, teacher. Absolute glee. The first to see him alive. What a treat. So my next story is I want to take us to Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is a story that I'm going to admit to you that outside of the children's song that we sing, Zacchaeus was a wee little man was he. I've never really given a ton of thought to Zacchaeus, but this is where I was taken. And I want to ask you guys a question. Why did Zacchaeus climb the tree? That's what the song tells us. That's what we get from a rhyme. Let me ask you a question. This man is a pariah. He's a tax collector, which is bad. But he's also an extortionist, meaning he's taking a lot more. What's worse is he's a collaborator because this money is going to the Romans. So is this the kind of guy that wants to get up into a tree and make a fool of himself? I don't think so. I think he got up in that tree because he knew he was lost. And somehow he knew that Jesus, the Master, could make it right. And he could not let that opportunity pass. He had to get this man's attention. Frankly, I looked and I don't really see any biblical reference to Zacchaeus' stature being short. But he wasn't going to let that pass. Now, Jesus' reaction to Zacchaeus is every bit as beautiful as his reactions with Mary. He's like, no conviction, no accusation. I'm coming over to your house. What was Zacchaeus' response to this? We don't see Jesus convicting Zacchaeus, but he was convicted. He just lashes out publicly in front of everybody. He makes this oath. I am going to give back 4 times what I stole and half to the poor. Now, I'm a financial guy. I did a little math. If I gave back 4 times what I had extorted and then half to the poor, I don't have any money left. And he did this voluntarily and of his own accord. So money was his problem. He knew it. Jesus, we don't have any record of Jesus talking to him about it. Next, I want to talk about the miracle of the 10 lepers. Let's talk about a day in the life of a leper. I didn't dress up like this to entertain you. I dressed up like this because I think this view of myself is the one that I should have before God. But a day in the life of a leper was pretty bad. Leprosy, as far as the Bible is concerned, isn't just Hansen's disease, which is a pretty awful disease. It could be any infectious skin disease. It could be a fungus. If it was communicable and it looked bad, you were unclean. Now, what's worse about this person is not only were they rejected completely by society, but the belief system indicated that it was your great sin that led you to that point. So a day in the life of a leper looked like this. When you were hungry, you went into the public, masked. Sound familiar? And you covered yourself with a mask, and anytime there was somebody near you, you would say, "Unclean, unclean." And then what people would do to you is they would throw pennies at you, and they would throw food. So that's how you survived, by walking around in marketplaces yelling unclean. What's really significant about this story is how many of you remember out of Jesus healing the 10 lepers, how many came back? Right? And interestingly enough, what was his nationality? The Bible tells us very specifically what was his nationality. He's a Samaritan. You get my theme here? The worst of the worst, Zacchaeus, Mary, and this 10th leper. I ask myself, were the 9 thankful? Do you think they were thankful that they didn't have leprosy anymore? Yes or no? Were they thankful? Did they show any thanks? Now, granted, if you're a leper, you have no cash offering. You have nothing to give other than the simple act of delaying your return to society, to just for a second put on hold getting back to your wife, your family, your job, the normal. Sometimes I think I'm part of the 9. I don't tell too many people this. I haven't told anybody, in fact. My family doesn't know this. But in the beginning of 2019, January, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Yeah, that's a big deal. I had some blood work done because I didn't feel good. I hadn't felt good for a long time, and I hadn't been to the doctor in 32 years. My discharge physical from the U.S. Navy had been the last time. And after some blood work, it didn't look good. And he told me the name. I had never heard of it before. And of course, Google is your friend. I became an expert overnight. My prognosis didn't look good. He assigned me a bunch of follow-up blood work, but it was complex blood work that had to be sent out to foreign labs for interpretation. And I had to wait, literally, for a month because the lab made a mistake. I had to redo it. And this whole time, this whole month, I think I have terminal cancer. How do you guys think I lived my life in that month? Suddenly I wanted to juice. I wanted to cleanse. I wanted to eat everything good. I wanted to live my life like someone trying to battle cancer. And I was ready to do just about anything. But of course, once the follow-up paperwork did get interpreted and did come back, I'm a little angry with that doctor for kind of spilling the beans before he had the conclusive proof. To me, that's bad doctoring. You don't tell somebody they have terminal cancer unless you're a little more sure. The sad part of this story is, what do you think happened to me as the months proceeded? I wanted to get back to normal. I wasn't living clean and eating the way that I had been. And I can imagine that these 9 lepers, the ones that didn't even take time to say thank you to Jesus, wanted to get back to their normal. Maybe because they were Jews, they somehow felt entitled to God's goodness. So the thought occurred to me, do I somehow think because I'm a Christian, because I'm an Adventist, or because these people were members of the Sanhedrin, or whatever Puritan group that we think we're in, are we somehow more deserving? Because I found a theme here, and the theme kind of indicates that the more full we are of our own goodness, the less inclined we are to be truly thankful. So how thankful? I'm sorry, the font on that's, a little bit small. But we see from Zacchaeus, he's basically giving away everything. He's the lowest of the low. The Magdalene, the lowest of the low, making that final offering. And then the 10th leper, who just comes back in time to say, thank you. Something popped into my head. I was thinking the opposite of thanks and gratitude. And so I have these other two characters. I was thinking of Nicodemus and the rich young ruler, because both were offered opportunities to be the 13th and 14th disciple. We know the rich young ruler had a money problem too, just like Zacchaeus. But what does he try to do to Jesus when he meets him, folks? What does he say? I am good. I follow all the commandments, right? First words out of his mouth. But he follows up, what must I do? And Jesus tells him. And he went away sad. Is there gratitude there in that transaction? Is there thanks? This man's full of his own goodness, his position, his wealth, his status. Nicodemus, even worse. He wants to play theology with Jesus. He's playing games. So, Jesus, what do you mean? I have to get back in the womb? Are you with me? I can almost hear Zacchaeus saying, Jesus, is the righteousness that you're offering imputed or imparted? But he doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. Fortunately, Nicodemus comes around later, we're told. But he missed an opportunity there. He missed an opportunity to be with Jesus those years because, again, who is Nicodemus full of? He's full of his own goodness. He's a member of the Sanhedrin. We're familiar with the proverb, the greater the sin, the greater the forgiveness. But it almost seems to me that the more empty I am of my own goodness, the more grateful and thankful that I am. That's what these stories are speaking to me loud and clear, especially when I think of thanksgiving of sacrifice. I'm actually having to do something here. I don't think these folks thought they were worthy. That's why I'm dressed like this. I can approach God as a squared-away businessman and a member of a good local church, and I can be really full of my goodness. But my brothers and sisters, I think this is the most authentic way to view myself. Because this entire transaction between God and us, everything that he's done, this entire Bible is about one thing: us being unclean, made clean again. Our goodness is nothing. You know, the first instance that I can find in the Bible of someone that was entitled, someone that was good, and someone was seriously bent out of shape that bad things were happening to them was Job. How can you do this to me? I want to take you to court. God shows up to court. I'm God. I created everything. Oh. And suddenly all of his charges, all of his accusations, and his goodness were gone. And he was immediately humbled before the Lord. So the first example of someone being full of their own goodness. And God never, have you noticed that God never argued with Job? Never told him he wasn't good. He must have been the real deal. I think he's the only character in the Bible that's gotten away with that. What should we do with this? I'm not going to tell you. That's between you and your Jesus. Whatever he puts on your heart. But there's something about Psalms 50 here in what David is saying and Leviticus called the sacrifice of thanksgiving. And it talks about these oaths that we give before God. And I can't tell you what those are, but I can tell you that God finds them pleasing when they come from our heart. So perhaps consider today that thanksgiving, giving thanks, let us give thanks, may be more, and it may be deeper. Because from what I can tell about all these Levitical feasts and sacrifices, they were designed as reminders. Meaning what? Meaning we'd forget. Never thought of that before, forgetting to be thankful. Thank you very much. I wish you all the best in the rest of your holidays and the very best of Thanksgivings. Dearest Jesus, who art in heaven, we may not even have the right idea of the gratitude that we should feel for you. Put this in our hearts. Help our opinions of ourselves to be reduced, that we can truly be grateful to you and for what you have done for us. In your precious and holy name, amen.